people who will soon discover that the system doesn't work. Here in America, I cannot believe the number of people who buy the socialist agenda, who look around the world and see that everywhere that has been put into place, it has brought on nothing but suffering and death and misery and labor camps and the destruction of the human spirit. We have everything to live for in this country. We have had more than any nation and any people on the face of this earth. Yet these stupid fools, these socialist puppets, these ignoramuses, these no-brain, air-headed twits want to destroy this nation and make it another socialist puppet. It is beyond my understanding, folks, how this happens. It's beyond my understanding how people can even think like this. It's beyond my understanding how they can rationalize and justify why everyone else is going to suffer, but not them. Not them. And if you talk to them, you'll find out that that's exactly what they think. It's just like when Jane Fonda was campaigning all over California and the nation for gun control, and she was stopped in her car on a freeway in California, and the police found the car was full of guns, and you know what she said? She said, that's for everybody else. I'm a famous person, and I need protection. So it was okay for her to have guns in her car. But she was traveling around the nation with this car full of guns, promoting gun control. It's the typical socialist mindset. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Never has, and as far as I can see, never will. The socialist system has never, ever been a success in any experiment where it has ever been tried, where it has ever been put to work. In any country where socialism has prevailed, it has always failed. Ladies and gentlemen, again, from the congressional record of the House, our Declaration of Independence concludes with these words, quote, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, unquote. Now, does that mean that all of you out there listening refuse to pledge your lives? Have you gone back on this? You'd rather have your fortunes than your freedom? And I guess you don't have any sacred honor, because I don't see too many of you standing up and doing anything about it. Let me read that to you again, folks. It concludes, our Declaration of Independence concludes with these words, and I would recommend that you read the entire document, by the way, if you don't have a copy. You're really not an American anyway. Quote, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This, folks, is a full and complete acknowledgement of divine guidance. Nowhere in the United Nations Charter or any of its subsidiaries do you find any reference to a supreme being. The Bible says, quote, unless the Lord build an house, they labor in vain who build it, unquote. Socialists don't believe in God. They don't believe in anything. That's why they are socialists. That's why they need the big, protective, all-encompassing, all-powerful socialist state, which to them is their daddy, to protect them against the cruelties of the world, to powder their butts, to change their diapers, to send them off to school, to learn the little socialist catechism, to clothe them and to feed them and to make sure that they have a job, whether they know how to work or not, doesn't make any difference. And they all pretend to work, and Daddy pretends to pay them. And then, just like in the Soviet Union, everybody jumps into a bottle of vodka and lives in the fantasy that the great Soviet state, the socialist state, is, in fact, their world utopia. I continue from the congressional record. There is indeed no evidence of the Lord's work in the United Nations. I know that I will be accused of being irresponsible and fanatical, but I find myself in good company. The testimony of 5 of our greatest fighting men, General Clark, General Van Fleet, General Stratmeyer, Admiral Joy, and Lieutenant General Almond before the Jenner Committee in 1954 was summed up in the words of General Stratmeyer. Quote, "We were required to lose the Korean War," unquote. Ward Beaverbrook, noted British publisher, said, "Here in New York City, you Americans have the biggest 5th column in the world, the United Nations." Why do you think the United Nations was built upon American soil? Dear listeners, where did the land come from? Boy, my English teacher would sure smack me upside the head for that. Where did the land come from? Why, it was purchased and donated by the Rockefeller family. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rockefeller family is a Zionist family. Behind all of this in the world today, as you will ultimately come to find out at the end of our series on Mystery Babylon, is international Zionism. It has nothing to do with reestablishing the state of Israel, and the Jews have a rude awakening, for they're being used in this plot, this plan. And all of you who believe that it's the Jews bringing it about, you better think again. For it is Queen Elizabeth sitting on her throne in England who claims to be the ruler of Israel, and she claims that the stone which is held under her throne is Jacob's pillar, and it is that claim, she claims, that gives her the right to rule. She claims direct descendancy from the house of David, and if you've read prophecy, you know what that means. And all of these identity Christian groups who are being taught lies are being used also to help bring this about. If you study the history of the Anglo-Aryan races in Northern Europe, you'll find they have no connection to Israel, no Hebrew root in their language, and they were, in fact, terrible, terrified, naked murderers, thieves, vagabonds, and pagans through and through. There is no trace of the religion that Jesus Christ gave to us in the Middle East anywhere to be found in the ancient history of the Anglo-Aryan peoples. They are not the tribe of Israel. We will prove that on this program, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got the patience to stick it out. At this point, continuing in the congressional record of the House, at this point, may I say, Mr. Speaker, that Alger Hiss recommended the first 500 employees for the United Nations. And after that, the late Robert Taft said, "The United Nations has become a trap. Let's go it alone." Herbert Hoover said, "Unless the United Nations is completely reorganized without the communist nations in it, we should get out of it." Winston Churchill said, "Don't pay attention to the United Nations." Charles de Gaulle has warned the United Nations to stay out of Algeria. Now, Mr. Speaker, let us look at the present management of the United Nations. Russia had been demanding a troika to supplant the United Nations Secretariat after the death of Hammarskjöld. The failure of Russia to secure this troika was hailed as a great victory for the West. What was it? U Thant of Burma, a self-styled Marxist, was chosen, and he agreed to invite a limited number of United Nations undersecretaries to act as my principal advisors on important questions. So far, he has indicated 2. Georgy P. Markadov, a communist from the Soviet Union, the head of the military forces for the United Nations, and Ralph Bunche of the United States. This was a communist victory in that Russia now has its troika. 1, an avowed Marxist, the 2nd, a dedicated communist, and the 3rd, with a pro-communist bias. A resume of Dr. Bunche's record, prepared by Archibald B. Roosevelt, son of Theodore Roosevelt, includes this paragraph. Quote, Dr. Bunche was part of the editorial apparatus of an openly communist magazine, Science and Society, for over 4 years. He contributed to this publication and added his name and prestige as a professor of Howard University even after the communists in their publication. The communists openly state that Science and Society magazine had as its function to help Marx-word-moving students and intellectuals to come closer to Marxism-Leninism, to bring communist thought into academic circles. In a Senate probe by the Internal Security Subcommittee, it was brought out that Dr. Bunch had repeatedly pressured persons in charge of United Nations employment to hire a notorious communist agent, in spite of the fact that here was a derogatory report against the individual by a security agency of the government. Dr. Bunch was a high official in the Institute of Pacific Relations